Welcome you. Today we're taking a slightly different path, a deep dive tailored just for you into the Mahabharata.
hmm
We're setting aside the epic battles for a moment, the usual stuff, and digging into something, well, potentially mind-blowing hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, like hidden facts within these really well-known stories.
Exactly. We're looking at some specific source material you provided excerpts from that pasted text podcast, focusing on Karna and the Kauravas.
Right. Their birth stories specifically, they're quite extraordinary. And what's really interesting is how they seem to echo modern scientific concepts, things we're only just now figuring out.
That's the core of it. Our mission, just for you today, is to explore these narratives and see if we can pull out insights related to, well, things like embryo transfer, maybe even cloning, artificial wombs.
Heavy stuff.
It really is. So, yeah, get ready, because the connections we might find could really shift how you see these ancient epics.
It's about perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
Moving beyond just the pure mythological lens and asking, okay, could there be a hint of some kind of like proto-science woven in here?
Were these divine acts? Or maybe descriptions of advanced technologies that were later lost or forgotten?
That's the big question we're tackling.
Okay, so let's start with Karna. The story, as most probably know, involves his mother, Kunti, getting this boon, this mantra, from Rishi Durvasa.
A powerful mantra. It allowed her to invoke any god.
And, well, apparently out of curiosity, she tries it out. She calls upon Surya, the sun god.
Right, and this is where that source material, the pasted text bits, gets really interesting. It talks about Surya using his divine energy to place what it calls a divine embryo inside Kunti.
And crucially, she wasn't married then.
Absolutely not, which
Yeah.
makes the whole thing unconventional, to say the least. Yet she conceives and gives birth to Karna. And he's not just any baby.
No, he's born a complete warrior. With Kavacha and Kundala, the divine armor and earrings, already there.
Already there, which
Yeah.
is, wow.
So here's the thought for you listening. Could this narrative be like an ancient way of describing something akin to in vitro fertilization?
It's provocative, right? A powerful entity, Surya, directly implanting something, an embryo, genetic material.
And then there's the genetic enhancement angle.
Exactly. The podcast you share touches on that. Is this divine embryo maybe symbolic of superior genetic material being introduced? Surya's DNA, perhaps, combining with Kunti's?
Leading to a child with built-in advantages, like the armor. It's not just symbolic protection, maybe it's biological.
Could be like an engineered trait. The podcast mentioned CRISPR, modern gene editing. Is Karna's birth an ancient echo of designing a perfect warrior? Purpose-built resilience?
It sounds incredibly futuristic being born with armor, but framed that way. Maybe it represents some kind of pre-programmed biological advantage, a superior defense system. What do you think? Does that resonate?
It definitely makes you pause and consider the circumstances, too. An unmarried Kunti, this unusual conception, does it hint at something beyond normal gestation? Maybe a controlled environment?
Like a surrogate situation almost.
Yeah.
Or bypassing the usual process somehow.
It raises questions, certainly. The narrative stresses divine power, but the outcome, a fully formed child appearing unconventionally, could be interpreted in different ways, maybe even hinting at something external.
Okay, let's hold that thought and shift to the Kauravas. Equally, if not more, mind-boggling. Gandhari gets a boon for 100 sons.
Yeah, but the birth isn't 100 babies. Well, it's described as a single lump of flesh, undifferentiated.
Pretty strange. And that's where Vin Vyas steps in.
Crucial intervention. He doesn't discard it. He takes this mass and divides it
Right.
into 100 parts.
And this is the detail your source podcast really jumped on. These parts weren't just left. They were placed in jars.
Yes, jars filled with specific substances, maybe ghee, herbs, kept for a specific duration. The podcast explicitly called these artificial wombs.
Think about that term. Artificial wombs, thousands of years ago, in an epic poem. It's staggering.
The scale alone, not 1, but 100. It's like, as the podcast termed it, an embryonic laboratory.
Right. And the description suggests a controlled environment too, doesn't it? Temperature, nutrients.
Even mentioning spiritual chants, which could imply, maintaining some kind of vibrational frequency or just a controlled specific atmosphere. It sounds very much like the conditions needed for modern lab-based development.
The parallel to modern stem cell science is almost unavoidable, isn't it? Your source ordered this out too. One mass of undifferentiated cells. Yeah.
Giving rise to multiple distinct individuals, stem cells have that potential, that pluripotency. Here, the story suggests creating whole beings from that initial mass. It implies pure biological replication.
Pure replication. 100 genetically identical sons.
Well, mostly. Don't forget their sister, Dushala. She came from the same process.
Oh, right. Good point. So the process wasn't gender-specific,
Mm-hmm.
which suggests even more control, perhaps.
It does. A very advanced level of control over the whole developmental sequence.
And here's something else to mull over, something the podcast highlighted. 100 genetically identical individuals. Yet they all grew up with distinct personalities, didn't they?
They did. Which hints at something like epigenetics, maybe. The idea that the base code is the same, but how those genes are expressed, that can be influenced by subtle environmental factors, even within those jars, perhaps, or just subsequent life experience.
Different switches getting flipped on the same genetic blueprint. Wow, we're grappling with that exact concept in science today.
Exactly. It's complex.
So, okay, this brings us right back to that central tension, the question you're probably asking yourself right now.
Hmm.
Are these just elaborate myths, symbolic stories about divine power and lineage?
Or do they contain echoes of a real lost technology, a biological understanding far beyond what we usually attribute to that era?
The podcast you shared, Pasted Text, put this question out there too. It mentioned other speculative technologies from ancient India, the Vimanas, the flying machines.
Right, the pushback Vimana, and even ideas about manipulating time. When you put the embryo science next to those, well, it paints a picture of potentially advanced, widespread knowledge.
Knowledge that might have been lost, maybe recorded in text we haven't found yet or couldn't understand.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Hidden away somewhere, perhaps. Or maybe, as your source suggested, this knowledge is starting to resurface now as our own science catches up to these ancient descriptions. It's an intriguing idea.
That reconnecting with the past might actually unlock things for our future.
It reframes the epics, doesn't it? Not just myths, but maybe partial records, symbolic blueprints even, of what a past civilization might have achieved.
So, Karna's birth, the Kauravas' creation, more than just stories. Could they be signposts pointing to ancient India's biological sophistication? Definitely gives you a lot to chew on.
It certainly does. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from these really miraculous-seeming births in the Mahabharata to some pretty startling parallels with 21st century science.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. And as you continue thinking about all this, just consider the implications. Whether you read these as literal history or profound symbolism, they offer a really unique window into how ancient people viewed life, creation, and maybe potential.
And building on that final thought from the Pasted Text podcast about consciousness, maybe the ultimate technology isn't really the external stuff, the jars, the mantras, whatever they represent.
What then?
Perhaps it's internal, the power of human consciousness itself. Awareness, understanding. Could that have played a role in these extraordinary events described in the epics? Could a deeper grasp of consciousness itself be the lost science?
Consciousness as the ultimate tool. Now, that is a provocative thought to leave you with, something to really ponder.